My name's Casey Hill, Director of Engineering, Free Fall Dillon Rifle Company. Today we're going to show you how to remove your trigger out of your AR and install your new OPAR Trigger accessory. So first off, we want to make sure that the gun's unloaded. So we're going to eject the magazine and we're going to check the chamber. When you're done checking the chamber, make sure everything's clear. Make sure you're in the safe position and pop out that rear takedown pin. Once you've got that, you'll want to pop off your pivot pin here and remove the upper and lower receiver. Once you've got those separated, you'll be able to start diving into it. Every grip's going to be a little bit different. On the bottom of this, we've got a mag pull and they have a little end cap. Some of them do, some of them don't. You might have to have an Allen key, or you might have to have a flathead or a Phillips, depending on what screws inside there. We're running an Allen key, and it's a 5/32. So we're just going to start removing this out of here. To remove the trigger, you don't necessarily need to do that on a standard GI trigger because you can pivot this trigger independent. But we want to get that started just because what's going to end up happening when we drop this in, we're going to want that safety selector out of the way. So I'm going to remove those out. Now, one step you want to make sure of is there's a spring and a detent right here. So if I was to remove this out all the way, that little pin and that spring can fall and can get lost. So don't lose them. They're kind of important. So generally we wanted to try to remove the trigger pin and hammer. When you're doing so, apply a little pressure to the hammer and release that. Get that trigger out of there. There we go. Now when you try to move that pin, you'll see when you start to move that out of the way that that hammer is under spring tension. And when that's under spring tension, it'll give you a little bit of a fight and it'll spring out. So just be aware that that can spring out of there. And the trigger, same thing. Generally speaking, you want to remove the pins left to right and install pins right to left with your muzzle facing away from you. So now that we've got our standard GI trigger removed out of there, we can set those off to the side. We'll grab our new OPAR trigger and we'll set that in there. Now, because this is all one contained unit, we can't just rock the hammer, the trigger around when this is all seated in. So you got to make sure that that safety selector, just sleeve that back into position. You might have to rock the trigger back a little bit to drop that back end down to get that safety selector to fall in. So when you do that, now you can resecure your grip, making sure that that detent and that spring stay in position. So we're just going to tighten this back down. Now that we've got that, I want to make sure that the safety selector is going to work once I got this secured. So now I'm going to take my trigger pins. I'm going to start installing them. You can install your old trigger pins, and we've actually got the better ones, which are going to be your anti-walk. So the problem you're going to run into with your old trigger pins, you saw how easy I could get those in and out. That's going to be kind of the dilemma you're going to run into if you stick with your old trigger pins. So we've got here a set of anti-walk pins. You can buy a bunch of them off of the market. There's a wide range of them. Dillon Rifle Company will have their own as well. So go ahead, we'll start installing those pins. I do recommend applying a little blue Loctite to them. I've already got a little dab on there. So we're going to go ahead, just thread those in. Now, depending on what anti-walk pins you get, depends on what size screws they run, and depends on if they even use screws. But what we've got are 440 screws, so you want to make sure that you don't strip the head out. Little 440s, they don't require a lot of torque on them, so just kind of tighten them down a little bit. When you start feeling a little resistance, they're going to be tight enough, especially with that blue Loctite. You won't have to really worry about it because you've not got loading this way, you've just got vibration that you have to worry about. So we'll secure those down. Now that that's in, we got to make sure that the trigger is working and operating safely. So in order to do that, we're going to flip it to safe position. We're going to pull the trigger and make sure that that does not fire. We're going to flip to the fire position. Now, you want to either put something in the way or catch the hammer so that you're not damaging your lower receiver. So I'm just going to put my finger right here and let the hammer fall onto it. I've got it in fire position. I'm going to pull the trigger and let it fire. So it fires. Now I've got to check the disconnect timing. So I've got that held. Keep holding the trigger back and let that disconnect grab that hammer. And then slowly release that trigger. And you want to make sure that that hammer does not fall and smack your receiver. If you do, there's something that's wrong. There's a problem on the disconnect or there's a problem on the installation process. Once you know that that's reset, pull the trigger again, make sure it fires, reset, go back to safe, go back to fire, safe, and you are good to go. So now we'll just attach that upper receiver. Make sure your pivot pin and your takedown pin are opened up to accept that upper receiver. I'm going to load that front end, get that pivot pin in, load that, put the takedown pin in, and we're ready to go. Once you got that, you're ready to go to the range.